Hi guys, welcome to another episode on our channel Ron Sailing. As you know by now, we're building our dream boat, which is going to be a 50-foot sailboat, cutter rigged, and we're actually standing inside of her hull right now.
Yeah, this week we thought we should do a Q&A video. We've been getting a lot of questions about the boat build, some really technical and some more, about everything really. And since the planking is taking quite a lot of time, a bit more than we first thought, even if we have been doing pretty good progress lately. But to not bore you guys with more planking, we thought it's better to gather some more material before we put out another video about the build of the hull. So this week we're going to answer a lot of the questions that we've been getting in the comment section.
And we really love that you guys write comments on our videos. It's so nice of you that you take the time to do that, and we always feel bad that we're not able to answer all of you. But we read everything, so that's why we also thought it was a good opportunity today to bring up some of those questions that we've been getting about the boat build and the project, and talk about that, and we hope you get some more knowledge.
Yeah, about the boat build and what's happening moving forward.
So let's get started and answer some questions.
Yeah. So using plywood instead of cedar, no, probably not a very good idea. At least not the way we're building this boat, since it's pretty round, and if you want plywood to conform to these curves that we have on this hull, that would have been really hard, since you have to bend the plywood in two directions. And to overcome that, you need to use very thin plywood or use it in layers, and that would add to the time. And if you want to have the same spacing, since we're building a sandwich hull and you want to have the same spacing between the outer and the inner layer of fiber, that hull would have been very heavy, having 28 millimeters of plywood as core. And also nowadays plywood is really expensive if you want to have good quality plywood. So for the price we got this cedar, I can't really see that even on price that it would be a very good idea using plywood. So no, that's the short answer.
When you work with a natural material like wood, for example, it's inevitable that there will be slight differences in properties in each plank because they come from different logs and trees. And as we have done here, we've then ripped these bigger planks into smaller and thinner strips, as you can see here. And yeah, you can also see that they do slightly differ in color, but when you put them all together and you form this big structure on the hull, it will even out these small differences in properties that each strip might have. So it doesn't really matter then any longer. And in addition to that, a lot of the strength in this hull will come from the inner and outer layer of the fiberglass.
So as you can see, we have a pretty limited ceiling height in here. It's 3.8 meters, so it's not really possible to have the keel attached to the hull inside of here. So the plan is to build the keel off-site, and once the hull or the boat is finished in a few years, we will mount the keel outside of the barn. Another option could be to remove the ceiling, but I don't think that's a very good idea, and there's really no reason to do it. And also having a bit smaller space in here is nice if you need to heat this space up, because there's less volume this way. So yeah, that's the answer to that. We will mount the keel later on when everything is finished. That's some of the last job that we will do on the boat. Yeah, and even without the keel attached, there will be quite tight up against the roof once the hull is turned over and it's time to build that deck house. I have calculated if we get the hull really low down, around something like that above the floor, 10 centimeters, we will have around 60 centimeters of space of the roof of the deck house up into the ceiling in here. So it's possible to work up there, but obviously on top of that deck house, only having 60 centimeters or 2 feet, that's pretty tight. So another option could be that we will build the deck house in another place and then mount it once the hull is outside of here. But the plan for now is to try to build everything in here because it is possible to get it out even with the deck house on, at least below the big beam up there. Maybe we have to do some alterations to that shed that I built, the extension of the barn, but that's pretty easy to do.
The skeleton you see in here are the temporary hull frames that we built out of plywood, which are here to transfer the shape in the 3D files into reality, and which we are forming the whole hull shape on top. And after the hull is turned over, these will still be here. We will get the hull in here inside of the barn again. They will still be here because they have to be here to keep the shape of the hull. And then slowly we will remove a couple of temporary hull frames and replace those with permanent bulkheads, which are like the walls inside of the boat, and also together with deck beams. And these will then keep the form and shape of the hull. So we'll do that slowly over the whole boat until all of the temporary hull frames are removed.
A lot of things on boats involves compromises, or at least when you're designing a boat. And it's the same here with the bow. What we've been trying to do here is to create a fast hull with narrow or sharp entry angles at the waterline, up there or down there, but still having plenty of deck space far in front on the deck. And that means that we need to build a pretty plumb bow up here like this, so we have that deck space. So that's a trade-off. I really like the look of it, and we still have a really sharp bow at the waterline. And even if the boat dives down under sometimes and you're thinking, oh, it looks so plumb up here, won't that stop the boat? Remember, it's a 50-foot boat, so even if it's sometimes dive underwater a bit up to here maybe, that really won't stop the boat much. So I think it's a good trade-off, because it's not a racing boat. We want a fast boat, but we also want a practical boat since we're going to live and cruise on it. So it's nice to have plenty of space for anchor, windlass, and gear up front at deck level as well. So the keel on run 3 will be a pretty long keel, not a real long keel, but it's around 5 meters long, 4.8 meters to be exact. And the draft of the boat will be somewhere around 2.2 meters. And it will be a bolt-on keel, but don't worry, it will be a really secure bolt-on. We will use a 20 millimeter thick stainless steel plate that will be countersink into the hull. And that plate is 0.5 meter wide. And all the keel bolts, if you can call it that, will be at the edges of that plate, which means that you have a pretty wide area, big surface area, and pretty wide between the bolts. And then the actual keel box will be welded to that thick plate and filled with, not filled, but we will have lead in the bottom of that. and some tanks above the lead. Probably for water, but we might have diesel in there as well if we decide to have a day tank in the engine compartment. And the plan is to build the keel box from a type of stainless steel that has a better property than normal acid-proof stainless steel like 316. So it works better in a saltwater environment and also in an oxygen-starved environment. So you won't have crevice corrosion and other problems like that you can get from normal stainless steel. So that's what we're aiming for. Maybe that's not possible, but that's what we're thinking right now. If that's not possible, we might go for normal 316 stainless steel and have a heavy coating of epoxy, a special type of epoxy that you can coat stainless steel with. We've been using that in the past on round 1, and that worked really good as well. So that's another option.
This is the color that round 3 has at the moment, but it's only on the rendering files. We won't have this color in reality. And we're not completely sure of which color we will have, but we think we're going for a gray hull color again, because we had that on round 1, if you remember. And we really like that color. It looks well in water and melts in well in water and nature. But I think if we go for gray, we will have a slight brighter shade of gray than we had on round 1. But yet to be decided completely, and who knows, we might add a design on the hull or something. We'll see.
We have almost used up all the cedar we have now. We only have 12 more strips that we can mount on the hull. And one idea that we had in the past was to use another type of wood for the last 10 or 15% or so, since we're missing some of the cedar. But we have changed those plans since we have found a source where we can get more cedar. We haven't seen that cedar, but the plan is to go and see it in a few days and hopefully buy some of that. So we can build the whole hull from Western red cedar. And the special with the cedar that we have found is that it's actually grown here in Sweden. And it's pretty strange history around this timber, since Western red cedar is not a native species of Sweden. Normally, from what I know, you only find it in Alaska and British Columbia, maybe somewhere else. Also, maybe in Washington State, but certainly not in Sweden. But as it happens, there's one place where they have planted these trees in the late 1800s, and a few of those trees got taken down by a storm a few years ago, and a logger in that area, he contacted us when he saw that we were missing some of the cedar, and offered us to buy some of that. So that's the plan. We're trying to get cedar from that. Those trees are not as old as the cedar we have now in the hull. Those trees were planted in 1880s or so around 140-year-old trees. And probably the trees we have in the hull so far are much older, from Haida Gwaii in British Columbia. So it could be that there's more knots in those planks that we can buy, but we get it for a really reasonable price. So I'm thinking maybe we can cut those knots out and still have some really good runs of nice Western red cedar also for the last 10%. And another thing is that we have decided that where the keel attaches to the hull, we won't have any cedar where the keel bolts goes through. We will have solid glass in that area. So that saves us around 3 square meters where that keel plate will sit, since there won't be any timber or wood at all in that area.
And what's the reason for that?
The reason for that is that if you get a leak through the keel bolts, It's nice that you don't have any wood in that area. It will be solid glass with epoxy, so you won't have any rot if that happens sometime in the future.
So that was answers to some of your questions that you've been asking. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and don't worry, next week we will be back with more planking and probably some footage from the Swedish cedar that we're going to go and look at.
Definitely.
Thanks a lot for watching, and see you next week, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.